campaign that matters. Sorry, I get a little bit emotionally here. So first of all, so for everyone that is like attending the event, I suggest you to put on mute and to put your camera off. Then later on, you will have 15 minutes to actually ask question at the end. So you can type your question in the public chat on the left, or at the same time, you just unmute yourself. There is a little microphone under, and ask the question directly to the speakers. So we're going to use the public chat to ask the question, and the shared notes on your left, on the right. I can see on my left, probably is on your right from you, where you can actually share some interesting information, or if you want to share something that you find inspirational. So I can see in the audience that some of you are new to the platform. So what I want to share some information about who we are and what we think is born to is we promote. And what we do is basically supporting women in that growth, in that career growth, by endorsing that personal growth. We born like 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago, and we are growing. So we started with basically events, meetup events. It was wonderful. I had so much fun when we had the opportunity to meet up here in London. We did also a couple of events in Milan. The platform is at the moment in the UK and also in Italy. But then with the pandemic, we moved basically to webinars. So we do 2 webinars per month. It seems like the people loving it. So we're going to keep going until we're going to go back to live events. We also have a zine in which we interview people. We share stories of women that are doing something great, changing and changing something in their fields, in their sector, and improving and make some change with their activity, with their business, with their creativity. And we recently also launched our consultancy. So as a company, we also supporting agency at the moment, creative agency, in creating diverse and inclusive marketing program, and we keep growing more company in become we can actually support more better and more diverse and inclusive. And obviously you can find us on Instagram, on Telegram. We just launched our Telegram channel last week, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Twitter. So I'm gonna now get over to Caroline, that is gonna introduce the topic of tonight and the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rossella. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speakers today. To us about how to do a diverse and inclusive marketing that matters. This is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested, because it's by creating a diverse and inclusive marketing content that we can best ensure the future of our brands and our workplaces. So today we have with us Julia Magaldi. She's a Senior Eye Director at Gut Miami. Ilaria Paschinelli, she's a VP Marketing at Cannes Lions. Christina Maria, she's a Marketing Executive at CommuSoft. Antonio Woodlawn, she's a Speaker, Consultant, Facilitator at Idali Consulting LLC. Thank you, ladies, for participating in this event. Over to you, Rossella.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much, Caroline. So what we're going to do tonight is basically see what's the situation in advertising. I mean, how we look like in advertising. And to do this, Ilaria shared with me a really by Cannes Lions and the interesting research that has been done on gender, on this research to see media. So we're going to share all the ads that has been presented at Cannes Lions from 2016 till 2019, and then showing a little bit of this research, and then we're going to go from there to analyze the how we can improve that, and what can be done also to make your team more diverse. So I'm going to start by sharing the presentation, and Ilaria is going to basically share the result of this research. So let's start from slide 1.
Lovely. Thank you, Rossella. Thank you.
Over to you. Over to you, Ilaria.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all. So I just wanted to say, to sort of echo what Caroline has just said, why inclusive marketing is important. We know that culture defines change, and also what you see is what you believe the possibilities are, really. You look at the impact that marketing has on all of us as humans and as people. Really, it affects the way you see each other, the way you see the world, even the way you look at yourself. So in a way, we can really say that marketing and media really shape culture. So that's why, as a marketing industry, we've got a massive responsibility when it comes to, portray a world that's really, well represented and really inclusive. So if you go to the next slide, like Rossella was saying, but are we inclusive today? Is marketing really inclusive today? And so, like Rossella said, I'd like to bring you the results of a piece of research that we did in partnership with the Gina Davis Institute in 2020. So the Institute is a research organization that essentially has been, working really hard to fight stereotypes in media and advertising. Was founded by the actress, Gina Davis, and we've been partnering with them since 2015. And what we did in 2017 for the first time, we presented the first study conducted with the Institute at the Nuances Festival. And the study had the aim of taking a picture of gender representation, particularly in advertising and media, using the data, like Rossella referenced, of the Cannes Lions winning and shortlisted work from 2006 to 2016, because that was 2017. And we're really shocked with the results that we saw, because essentially what our research told us was that representation of women in advertising had not really improved from 2006 to 2016. So we're really shocked that, we said, we have to repeat this study every year to really see how we as an industry progress over time. And so in 2020, what we did, we examined, it's the same slide. We examined essentially the representation of not just gender, we went broader. We looked at race and ethnicity, LGBTQ, disability and age, and body size. And we looked at particularly work from 2006 to 2019, but with a focus on 2019, because we wanted to really assess what progress had been made, from 2018, 2019, but also comparing 2019 with, the beginning of our research in 2006. So I have to say that we particularly focused on advertising, that's film advertising, from the Anglo-Saxon countries. So we didn't do it globally. It was particularly focused on English-speaking films from UK, US, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, and Australia. And so what were the results? When it comes to gender, at the end of the day, what we discovered last year and 2 years ago, male characters continue to outnumber female characters when it comes to overall characters. We looked at screen time, speaking time, which at the end of the day tell women, if we are outnumbered, it tells women that women matter less in the worlds, portrayed by advertisers. If you look at then representation, not just diversity, right? Representation, how then those women in those ads were portrayed, male characters also take the upper hand with work, leadership, and authority, which reinforces essentially stereotypes that men should be in charge, right? Also, more men were shown in funny ads, which reinforces a cliche, a little bit of an old cliche, that women are not really funny. And finally, one element that we looked at was the sexualization of women. that also reflect stereotypes. And the female characters that are shown in revealing clothing and, you know, partially nude, a lot more than men. So in essence, you know, if you look at what we find out is that women simply appear to, you know, less in Caroline's work, and so overall, let's say, representative of advertising. And when they do appear, they often are depicted as sex objects who lack humor and power. Maybe not surprising. I don't know if you're surprised about it, but, you know, we'll go into discussion later. So if you look at then race, there we saw some progress in terms of the overall number and amount of time that you know, people of color, as an example, appear on screen. However, they are less likely to be shown working, and white characters are shown as martyr, which is something that, of course, you know, reinforce a negative stereotype. And then we looked at LGBTQ+, and, you know, characters are virtually non-existent, completely non-existent. And on the rare occasions that they do appear, they're less likely to be depicted either working or smart than other type characters. Then we went into looking at disability as an example, and, you know, again, like, you know, the other group, you know, the LGBTQ+ group, they're virtually absent. And however, when they do appear, they do not reinforce a negative stereotype. So they're not appearing, you know, how they're not. And if you look at the percentage of when they appear in ads, it's, you know, it's just over 2%. But if you look at the number of people with disability globally, it's 15%. So you see how they are underrepresented overall. And finally, when you look at age people, you know, we looked at people that are aged 60 years old plus, again, vastly represented in the ads. When they do appear, they're represented in both positive but stereotypical ways. Like, you know, younger characters are more likely to be seen in an office, but characters of, you know, age characters are more likely to be shown as leaders and possessing authority. And so this is again another, you know, sort of stereotyping the group. And then finally, body size. Characters with large body types are vastly underrepresented. Around 7% of characters in the ads that we analyzed show people with large body types. And if you look at the overall population globally, it's 39% of people with large body types. And when they are portrayed, they're normally portrayed as lazy people, which is again another stereotype. Maybe you're not surprised by that. So the conclusion is that we drew from the studies that there are some positive stories, especially around the diversity of people of color. So we saw some progress there, but there's so much to do, and we're going to talk about you know, that's what we're here today. So if you go to the next slide. So looking at some of the issues, right, you know, and I'd love to discuss with my, you know, fellow speakers here, because you know, I'm sure there are other issues that I've not considered here, but gender diversity, as an example, in teams, in advertising and marketing teams, especially in advertising and media, is a massive issue. You know, we know that overall, you know, more or less, only 3% of advertising creative directors are women. You know, and creative directors in advertising agencies, and Julia will have a, you know, really good idea of how this works, make really important decisions on key things like, you know, casting. You know, who do you cast for your ad? How do you represent those people that, you know, you're casting ads? So the fact that only 3% of women, I'm not surprised that women don't see themselves represented in ads overall. Racial diversity. Different stats from different bodies and organizations, but more or less nearly 90% of the UK ad industry is white. And in the US, that number is around 82%, which is, of course, another issue. There's something that Keith Weed, the ex-CMO of Unilever, said once. He said, as an industry, we have not overly committed to unstereotype ads. So we've not really focused until now actually doing it, and and doing it differently. So that might be one of the issues on the factors, sources of problems. And then ad casting, it is one of the key moments in the advertising process that really impacts heavily on what we see, the end product. In a recent study that an agency from Amsterdam that we partner with, via Pi, they did a survey in advertising and with more than 500 people, and 90% of ad people really believe that the industry needs to take on racist decision making in the casting process. What they said is that there are very racist decisions made when we cast ads, and it requires a lot of effort and commitment from those people that are on those, that make those decisions, to make anti-racial decisions when it comes to ad casting. And one of the problems when they asked, why don't you make anti-racial decisions when you cast for your ad, 70% of them said I don't feel I have a safe space to at work to share and discuss topics about racism and discrimination, so that that they don't feel safe in just talking about it. So there isn't a common shared language around it. And that's what I wanted to share for now, and see what my fellow speakers think about it.
Well, that was really interesting insights. And even if I think on this panel, more or less, it doesn't come like a new story. And we have been through, and I've been looking at as well at different type of research. And this is probably the most interesting one in the advertising. And is like a kind of reference if you want to see how we look like, at least in the, let's say, Western world. Obviously, this is not a global analysis, but is the majority of advertising. So this is bring me to really the first questions that I want to ask to the entire panel, and is, what's your experience as creative of diversity and inclusion in advertising? This is to say that how you as a creative experience this, and what's your experience as a creative? Have you faced that when we are talking about taking anti-racial decision? It's something that sometimes you face that type of situation. So I want to ask that to Giulia, because I think as a creative that works in the United States and also coming from Europe, she has probably, you can answer this question. I know that you know what I mean when I say anti-racial decision, and we have been talking about this lately.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for sharing all those information, Ilaria, because I think these are things that we know, but we don't hear enough. So we need to be shocked every time we hear them. So thank you. I work in the States since 8 years. I'm lucky enough, I have to say, that I worked in workplaces where there is a constant research of trying to involve women more in the leadership places, and people from different background, racial background, and then belief background, LGBTQ plus community. So there is always that constant research. It's never enough, because it's never we have always to talk about it to actually be updated, starting from me, because I lack of information sometimes, and the fact that I'm surrounded by diverse people helps me as a person and as a creative to take those anti-racial decisions, because we feel sometimes that we are not represented in the ads, and that's okay. No, that's when our power comes in. That's when we have to make decision that when we cast, there is a diverse cast. When we think about a commercial, from the idea, where the idea comes from, it's already in that mindset. when you think about a director, it's not a male director, it's also a female director. It's an African American or an Asian or whatever it is. We need that mindset to take anti-racial decision. And it's never enough, because I don't know if you saw one of the latest studies that in 2021, the Super Bowl directors, female directors, decreased incredibly. And this is just a stat that came out. But in 2018, it was actually 17% of female director for the Super Bowl ads. In 2021, we decreased 5%. So when we take a anti-racial, anti-sexist decision, it needs to be a question that is in your back of your head, like always. Am I taking the right decision? It's So
yeah. It's actually something that obviously you are talking about the States, and then Tony as well has come from the States. So your perception of the problem, because it's an issue, is different than the UK and the rest of Europe. So what's your experience, Christina, as a creative, of inequality and basically, yes, inequality in advertising? And if you are like in the position sometimes as a decision maker to take a stand on that level?
So having been part of the UK, working in marketing in the UK, and also I'm originally from Romania, and I've worked in marketing in Romania as well. I think it's definitely a responsibility that falls with the decision maker, like Julia mentioned, and everything starts with the creative. As you've mentioned, as marketing people, we have a responsibility to form the kind of culture that people get inspired by. And if we don't take this responsibility and we don't take actions for this, then of course nothing is going to change. But at the same time, I always thought that a brand has to reflect the consumer. And I think if there's one thing that we can all agree on, is that a lot more brands are global nowadays. So there's very few that actually come out and say, no, we don't want to sell to these people. Of course, they want to sell to as many people as possible. But if you want your brand to reflect your consumer, then automatically you need to have a diverse brand, because if you plan to sell globally, you are going to have a diverse consumer. So I like to bring into discussion the fact that it's not just an ethical decision to do diverse marketing, but it's also a business decision. And the way it reflects on my work personally, I think it starts with the smallest of things. So as a bit of a background, I work in marketing and as a content creator. So I produce digital media that goes online, from the smallest, the shortest of articles to social media posts to videos, etc. Every single piece has the responsibility to be inclusive. And at the same time, of course, we have ads that Julia mentioned, the really big ones. We have the Super Bowl ad, articles that you read on the internet, where when we as creators, we put them out, it's our responsibility to make sure that the narrative we're building is a diverse narrative. We don't enforce the stereotypes that Ilaria highlighted. So, for example, that women appear as objectified, or that people with different body sizes appear as lazy. Even when we tell these anecdotes on social media, it's important to think about these things. But I think this is going to be something we're going to highlight throughout the discussion, is that you need a diverse marketing team to do diverse marketing.
Exactly. And that is when it's the question, that my next question actually that I wanted to ask to Tony, because Tony, you are a consultant and you work as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant in global companies. So what's your point of view when it comes to the importance of diverse teams in creating actually behind the creative message, and actually create the message? So how important is that, and how do you think this can be improved in a way, what we can do as a decision maker to make that happen?
Yeah, thank you. And, that's a really great question. As I was listening to Ilaria present, the research, as Julia said, it's not that it was surprising, but it did shock me again, right? And I appreciate that, because we do need to be shocked every time. But what I want to highlight is when you look at the slide that's on our screen now, and we talk about the fact that only 3% of advertising creative directors are women. So then it's a no-brainer why women are portrayed the way that they are, or why there's a gap in representation amongst women in advertising and marketing. And when we think about all the other identities, right, that are misrepresented or underrepresented, what it gets down to, as Christina alluded to, was diverse teams and diverse hiring. So we can't, expect folks, because we all have implicit bias, right? We all have our cultures, our own backgrounds and experiences that make us who we are. And so we have these blind spots, right? So we have these hidden areas where, and most of us are well-meaning folks, where we don't mean to leave people out. We don't mean to portray people in a certain way, yet it happens because we're just thinking and creating from our perspectives and from our vantage points. And so that's why, like, the work that I do with organization is I start within the organization, right? Like, I think that to jump to say, hey, let's make sure that we, show more people of color on the screen. Well, but yeah, there's so many nuances, and people of color, that's not a monolith. So what we've got to do is bring in more people of color, more representation to actually help make those decisions. And even then it won't be perfect, right? Even then, because, I'm a Black woman and I can't make decisions for all Black women or all Black people. But what I can do is add that perspective that might otherwise be missing. And so just as important as bringing in people of color, I want to also look at on the far right, where we talk about 70% of people don't feel like they have a safe space to discuss these types of things. Again, that's not shocking. It's actually very prevalent, right? In most workspaces where there's not a culture of sharing and a culture of feedback. And I get it. I think that a lot of times, organizations get bogged down in the bottom line and the day-to-day, and it's all that other stuff can fall by the wayside, or we don't have time to do that. It's about our bottom line. And at the end of the day, if we don't take time to engage in this work, then we are negatively impacting our bottom line. And so, one of the recommendations that I always propose or share with organizations is that you've got to start, creating a culture of feedback, right? So even when we think about, a lot of the work I do is around how do you use your meeting time, like even things such as like an employee staff meeting where you normally might look at like projections and are you meeting your goals, but you've got to also build in that time to make that human connection, right? Start to normalize having conversations so that 70% of people who are saying that they don't feel like they have a safe space, that they can begin to raise their hand. And maybe they will start to raise those questions and say, hey, this is something that I noticed. Can we look more into that, right? And not wait for the next big study to come out. We can actually create, engage in action research within our organizations. Do, informal audits and take a look at your own data, right? And so that's just kind of the work that I do, because I feel like sometimes, when I talk with folks about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it seems like this mountain or this never-ending staircase. And what I say is just take the best next step and start with yourself. Start with not just hiring, but how are you going to retain the folks that you hire? I don't know if we're going to get into that a little bit later, but that's also important. What we want to start doing is shrinking that 70% and actually create inclusive and safe and brave spaces within our organizations, so that we can start to just do the hard work that it takes to look inside ourselves as companies.
That is actually fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing that, Tony, because I think something that, for example, I seen when I was working in corporation before is that when you are part of the corporate is like that you lose a little bit your own personality. So it's like, that's the rule, I have to follow the rule, and we become part of that culture. So the question that I ask, for example, to Ilaria is like, how do you think, obviously is your personal opinion, you are not talking, and we are not talking for the company you work for, but like we are here as Ilaria, Christina, Julia, and Tony. But what do you think is the best way? How do you think what you're doing to take a stand, let's say, in your company, or what we can do in order to take a stand in our company to make that conversation that Tony just highlighted before, to make people feel a little bit more safe, to create a more safer space for people to share their opinion and start to change the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm. I'll just quickly start and share. Such a huge proponent of the self-work, right? And so I would just say that, whenever I'm, for example, working with an organization, we don't jump to any of that other stuff until we do some identity work and start peeling away some of the layers. So in terms of, taking a stand, what's that next step? What it looks like? It looks like, it looks like doing the work of understanding how your identity is even shaped and contextualized. How do you show up in your company? How do you show up as a leader or executive? How do you show up in that C-suite, right? And how might that be impacting the folks around you? So again, for me, it begins with everyone doing their own work. And that can also run concurrently with a lot of collective work to bring about organizational change.
What do you think about that, Ilaria?
I think that, well, I agree with Tony. I think that two things. One, that use your voice. Because each and every one of us have a voice, and that's already a tool of power in a way, right? So use your voice to voice your concerns if you have any in your organization, and change, and bring change. And another thing is that's really important to remember is like bring your values. I'm not a different person in my personal life. When I get into my company, I'm the same person with the same values. So my values to how I am every day, how I run my team, how I do my work, etc. And also to bring change, if I want to bring change. And remember one thing, because you have a voice, which is a tool of power, you've got your values, don't underestimate the importance of actually changing and having companies to listen to you. If you don't speak up, if you don't even propose it, it's never going to happen. So I'm lucky to work for an organization that really listens, but I'm sure, not unsure, but sometimes I fear that people, like you were saying, Rossella, when you work in a corporation, you assume that you have to fit in and sort of, do what a lot of people make the same assumptions and nothing changes because they assume I have to behave this way because, nothing has been changing for the last, 20 years, but never assume because, because you are you and you've got your values and you've got your voice, you can absolutely change things, even if it's a small thing, a small initiative towards, I don't know, I don't feel that we've got enough diverse teams. How can I help hire more diverse teams within my organization? I'm pretty sure a lot, like you were saying, Tony, people don't mean bad things. People are quite good people overall, right? Organizations are made of people, which are generally speaking good people. So I'm sure that we'll be listening to your whatever big or small idea to either talk about the issue or whatever, or help solve part of the problem. So if you're thinking that, that's at least that's what helps me. I'm really, really hopeful and positive that I can bring change just by thinking, what are my values? I'll bring them, and my voice is really powerful if I want to use it that way.
I think that is an amazing point, because sometimes when we are part of the system, we think that we don't have that power. So what do you think about that, Christina? Is it something that resonates with you, or do you think that as a part of a company is like, I don't know, is the decision needs to come from the top, for example? or just for the top, from the top?
Absolutely. I mean, it's important for it to come from the top, and that would be the ideal situation, is to have a company leader that truly understands how important it is. But at the same time, we are all in the position of decision maker when we create our work, whether we are, juniors in the company, whether we're managers, whether we're in the C-suite. We all contribute something, and like Ilaria mentioned, we all have a voice that we can use to try and bring some things to attention. But at the same time, I think it really starts when either one of us is in a position to hire somebody else, because the thing is, we do have these biases, and we are very much tempted to choose people who are similar to us, whether that's your nationality, whether that's your skin color, whether that's your background, etc. And the first step is definitely to acknowledge this and to make sure that whenever you have to hire someone, or not even hire, but ask someone to be part of a project with you, somebody at work, for example, you try to think, am I asking this person just because they're like me? And if the answer is yes, I think it's super important to remind yourself that a successful team is not made up of clones, is made up of people who can actually disagree with you. Because out of disagreement and criticism and feedback is simply how we grow and we become better. If everyone just says to you, yeah, Christina, you're right, you're always right. I mean, I like hearing that, but that's not going to help me make my work better or for me to become, a person who's more aware. At the same time, I also just one thing I would like to highlight is that we are going to make mistakes. Some people's mistakes are bigger than other people's, but I think that a lot of these mistakes arise from the fact that they never had someone to disagree with them. And it's definitely something that we all have the responsibility to bring back to our organization, whether as people in a position of power or just as a member of the team. To bring up this culture where we are comfortable with asking, do you think I'm wrong to do this? Or do you think there's, any implication, any way that this could be misinterpreted? Because perhaps I have good intention. I probably have good intentions. But they do pave the road to hell oftentimes.
Yeah. And when you were saying they probably have good intention, it just came in my mind an example of campaign that probably started with a good intention, but was an epic disaster. So, and this is a campaign that Christina shared with me, and actually remind me, it's quite funny because I don't know if you remember a few years ago, Dolce Gabbana, they basically create this campaign that it became massive, but for obviously because it was an epic fail. So I'm going to share the video now, and because you have to play from your screen, we're going to look at this, just 30 seconds of this campaign and comment on that.
Margarita 披萨饼，欢迎收看 Dolce and Gabbana 洗快吃饭第1集。今天我们首先要向大家展示如何用这种小棍子形状的餐具来吃我们伟大的传统玛格丽特披萨饼。你们是不是一手拿一根，像小刀一样切一块披萨饼呢？不是这样。对。这样就对了，所以就是像钳子一样夹住一块披萨饼，直接送进嘴里。哦，别让奶酪滴下来。
So everyone remember this. So it was the voiceover, like commenting of a woman trying to eat pizza with chopsticks. Why was an epic fail? Well, it's clear why. I mean, they make fun of something that is a culture, make fun of a culture that is not just related to China, but to 70% of Asian population, because chopsticks is something that they use in China, in Thailand, in Japan. And obviously, like it was silly in a way that makes feel Chinese people like if they are a little bit silly because they don't know how to eat pizza. And so how is possible that you don't know how you can eat pizza with it? Obviously, when we eat tacos, so if I eat sushi, I know how I'm gonna eat them. So I'm gonna eat tacos with my hands and sushi with chopsticks. So the campaign was wrong from every single and on every single level. It was offensive. Dolce & Gabbana had to cancel the catwalk in China, and it was a massive backlash. So it was an epic fail. So because you suggest this campaign, Christina, when I ask you to suggest an example of bad campaign, why do you think this was an epic fail? So on top of what I already said, probably you observed something that I didn't see, and I want to know the reason why you suggest this campaign.
So I mean, this was definitely the first thing that came to mind, because it was just so epic in scale, not just the failure, but the scale of the campaign. Like you said, this was supposed to promote Dolce's first catwalk show in China, it being a huge market for them and one of their main drivers as a company. But also, there are so many nuances in this campaign. So, for example, the narrator, he is actually also mocking the pronunciation of Chinese nationals when it comes to, I'm not sure if you've noticed it, but when they say Dolce and Gabbana, it's a stunted pronunciation, because they make these assumptions, that, about people who have an accent when they speak English. Or, for example, it continues. The ad is just like one failure after the other. It's first is the pizza, then it's a cannoli. Then he says, "Is that cannoli too big for you?" And again, it brings all these stereotypes into question. And this was a huge campaign. This wasn't something that was, a video supposed to show up on Instagram and then disappear the next day. This was supposed to promote an important event for them. But like you said, the problem with having a failure of this magnitude is what you do in the aftermath. Because everyone makes mistakes. Like, there are so many failures in ad history. If you look back, from bad logos to bad names to whatnot. But the problem is how you deal with it afterwards. And the fact of the matter is that Dolce & Gabbana did nothing about this. They simply doubled down on their mistake, and they continued. And then there was a further scandal with Stefano, where the messages he sent on Instagram were published, where he continued to insult Chinese people, continued to say basically that it is not a good country, and all sorts of nonsense. So, for example, instead of accepting that they've made a mistake, that this campaign came from the wrong place, they made terrible assumption about a people that has a history that stretches, for thousands and thousands of years. This is an ancient culture that they're accusing that they don't know how to eat pizza. Instead of, taking responsibility and making meaningful change in the aftermath, they simply double down. They never made any attempt to make amends for the situation. And then they simply hope that people would forget. Unfortunately, it does seem like water off a duck's back. So we don't really see that much about, we've moved on to bigger scandals, basically, which I think is unfortunate, because unless we take responsibility, how is there going to be change?
Yeah, thank you so much. That is quite interesting. And it's quite interesting what you said. And it's actually something that a lot of brands have a tendency to do, instead of apologize and say, look, yes, we did a mistake, is actually something that we need to address. Differently, is the campaign that you, Julia, shared with me as a bad example. That was the campaign that has been created by Dove a few years ago. But in that kind of situation, in particular, they actually address the mistakes later. But why, Julia, when I ask you to share with me a bad example, you came up with Dove and with this specific campaign?
So, as happened with Christina, when I thought about a bad campaign, this came to my mind, and I said, okay, there must be a reason why. And I started analyzing myself. And that is nationwide. It stood for women of different colors, different shapes. They did Dove sketches. They did like so many campaigns that made me feel accepted. No one expected this. So no one stopped 1 second before publishing this. This was just a small video, social video to put on Facebook. No one stopped and said, wait, is this okay? Am I right? As Christina was saying, no one, I think they meant well. Probably someone felt that it was wrong, but they didn't feel comfortable to raise their hands and say, hey, I think this is wrong because of this. And that comes all from you feel comfortable to share your voice. Do you feel empowered to share your voice? And yes, there is a reality of high like the top making decision that maybe they didn't notice, and there is also another layer that maybe we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel like we can make a change, and it happens to me sometimes. I know it's wrong, and sometimes I don't raise my hand, and so it's a constant growth, I would say, to realize that you make mistake, and I've realized they made a mistake. They went back, they apologized, they explained where they came from, saying, this is where we made a mistake. We meant well. We know we were wrong now. And so admitting that you are wrong makes you human. And I think that's what Dove showed. Like, human beings make mistakes, and as human beings, we also know how to say sorry.
Yeah, that is actually an amazing way to see a failure in your creativity. So just say, I'm not knowledgeable enough, and I didn't have the right knowledge about this topic, so I apologize. So my question is now asking this out of curiosity, Ilaria, as in the history of Cannes Lions, and have it been like awarded or shortlisted campaign that were not, let's say, politically correct?
You mean if we ever awarded a piece of work that were not that was stereotyped?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that considering the history of Cannes Lions and considering that the advertising is changing so much compared to 20, 25 years ago, I believe that obviously a piece of work that was awarded 25 years ago, if you look back, it must be for sure it was stereotyped. But I mean, lately, what's the approach of Cannes Lions when, for example, I know that has been introduced, for example, the glass lions, and what is the approach that generally you follow to award a piece of work? And if it's happened that even if you take in consideration all these elements, one of the shortlisted or even one of the awarded work is actually is not perfect.
Yeah, of course, there's no perfection. And like you say, if you look back in the years and you look at, some of the work shortlisted or awarded, at that time, it was not considered stereotypical in that particular country. And, what stereotype means and the level of awareness of people that work in advertising and marketing of stereotype advertising changes. I'm sure if you look at UK advertising and Italian advertising, and I can say it because, I come from there, Julia and Marcella, you come from there too. So you understand what I mean, it's like it changes. We have, as Lions, we've been committed for years to sort of change and help the industry change and move forward. As an example, when it comes to form our juries, the jury that, because all of our work is awarded by the industry, we're not awarding it, it's the industry, right? Industry members that award the work. So we are really, really committed, we've been always committed to make sure that our juries are balanced from a gender perspective, as an example. So last year means, last year we had no awards, due to the pandemic, etc. But in 2019, we reached 48% of female representation in our jury, which is obviously not representative of the art industry at large. I was talking about, as an example, creative directors, female creative directors are 3%. And this year, we have, we're really, really proud that we got to 57% of our juries are women this year, and the rest is men. So, this is one of the initiatives that we take to sort of make sure that when they judge the work, we judge it from many different perspectives, and looking at what's the number of countries, that are represented in those juries are, is another area that we look at. So with that, we hope, that helps sort of when but at the end of the day, I always say that Lions is the benchmark for creative excellence. Everyone looks at the work that is awarded at Cannes Lions as the benchmark. So we have a responsibility of making sure that the work that's awarded and looked up as the benchmark fights stereotype and helps the industry move forward rather than reflecting the industry, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. And at that point, because we were talking about works that has been awarded at Cannes Lions, and they actually been amazing. So I want to share with you some really good example. That is one of the good example that Ilaria shared with me, and is this girl Can, that I personally found an amazing piece of work. So you just need to play.
Let's go! Mississippi putting it down. I'm the hottest round. And if you want me, y'all can stop me now. Since you with me now, the biggie bounce. I know you think the way I swap. Scream us down. Get your freak on. 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 People, here I come. Let's sweat me when I'm done. Now people gather round. Now people jump around. Get your freak on. Get your freak on. Get your freak on. Fire!
Yeah, that is actually an amazing commercial, and it's actually I think it resonates with everyone because it says the truth. I mean, I can see myself going to the gym, and I can see a lot of people in the class or in the swimming pool with me. It looks like some of my gym friends. So it's so real, and I think that is what people want to see. We're actually a little bit tired of seeing these perfect women, always so sexy. We want to see ourselves in the campaign. We want to see us, because at the end of the day, we are buying the product. So we want to see us in there. And it's actually, the more the campaign is real, the better opportunity you have to sell. So this is what a lot of brands, they don't really understand. But this is we were talking a lot about the creative side of the creativity behind. But what I'd like to ask to Tony, what we can do to raise awareness about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace in a way that it can be practical. So let's say from tomorrow we want to do something to make our place more diverse, more inclusive. We want to give some suggestion. If we are not in the position of power, or we don't have any decision, we are not a decision maker, what we can suggest to our boss to make a change, to change something?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I would say, I always say lead from your seat, right? So we're all in positions of some type of power, and there's always something that we can all do. And so if you're noticing that this is, something that you'd like to improve within your company, but you're not quite like an upper level decision maker, then I always talk about creating and or expanding your circle of power. Right? So you've got to find your tribe, your people within your organization that you can actually shoulder some of this work with. I've seen that a lot of organizations are starting to create, let's say, committees or councils or hire directors of diversity, equity, inclusion. There are lots of names for that. And that's all great work as well. But suppose your organization is not quite there yet. Then start somewhere. Start again by, trying to find someone else with whom you can share this view, this value, this conversation. Because the more that stuff starts to bubble up, then the folks who are at the upper level decision-making ranks, they will start to hear you. The other thing is, in terms of, I wanted to make a point about diverse hiring, because I've heard a lot of companies say, well, we just can't find, diverse candidates. We just can't, they're not out there, as if, there's only one type of candidate that's like, hey, here's my shiny resume, here I am, and no one else is qualified. But what I found instead is that a lot of companies don't know how to actively recruit the diverse. Looking to hire, let's say, more women, then make sure that you are like hitting women's colleges hard and those organizations that really cater to women. If you're looking to hire more candidates of color, I know that a lot of companies, for undergrad, for example, went to an HBCU to get my undergraduate degree, a historically Black college or university. And there were lots of organizations that I know were not marketing or posting their job postings at HBCUs. And so to actually see the results that we say we want to make, then we've got to do things differently. Again, it begins with our hiring. It begins with creating a culture in which people can use their voices. And so that's why I'm a huge proponent of taking a look at how we're spending our time. And that's where inclusion comes in. How are we including more voices? Because as Ilaria said, we do all have a voice, but there are many people who feel very marginalized and silenced at their places of employment, right? And so, for many of us, like, yeah, I have a voice and I use my voice to do good all day. I use it to make a living. But I know that within certain organizations, I have not always shared my voice or shared my thoughts. So how is it that then we create systems so that we gather information, we gather feedback? That's why I talk about a culture of feedback. We gather feedback from all of our constituents and all of the people within our organization. So, it's not enough to sit from a place of power position and state that, oh, my company is diverse and everyone's happy. You don't know unless you ask, and you don't know unless you invite that type of feedback within your organization. So yeah, it really, the culture really, really matters in terms of getting the types of things done that need to get done. But, I think we've all got to start someplace, and whatever the best next step is that you're comfortable with, as long as you're doing something. So if it's just emailing that colleague and saying, hey, I know we've had a chat, a side conversation or two, and you've also noticed this about our ad campaigns or this about our outcomes. Would you like to set up a meeting so we can just talk some more about that? That person may also be able to connect you or tune you into someone else who they've had a similar conversation with. And then you'll start to see how your tribe is formed, right? And so then you can take those conversations and take that feedback to folks who may not be as plugged in.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so true. Just do something, even if it's a little action. So I realized that it's already 7:30 and I always lose track of time. This is my problem. So I'd like to ask to the audience if do you have any question for the panel, or if you have any question that you want to ask in general or to someone in particular. And in the meantime, while we are waiting for the questions, I'd like also to ask to each one of you 3 tips on how to create a more diverse and inclusive marketing. So 3 tips that you can apply from the brand perspective, from the strategy perspective, content creation, or creative side. I mean, creating the idea. So I'll start with you, Christina.
Yes, so I think it's easy enough to obviously talk about it, but then we have to walk the walk, and that's where the challenges come. And basically summing up what I mentioned earlier during the talk is that whenever we're in a position, not just to hire someone, but also to ask someone to be a part of a project with us, work with us on something, or like Tony mentioned, support us in something, to ask each other, are we just asking them because they look like us, or they act like us, or they have a similar background to us? It's very easy, especially I see it in the UK, where we are fortunate enough to have a diverse team from cultural perspective. So, but you also see, the many clicks that happen at work naturally between people of the same nationality, and it's perfectly normal. Obviously, you speak a common language, you have a common background, etc. But I think it's very important that we make an effort to befriend people who are different from us, not just those who make us comfortable. Then my second tip would be that it's everyone's responsibility, whether in a position of power or not. You are an individual. Perhaps you aspire to be a leader one day. Act like it. Lead people. Use your voice, regardless of whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable. Of course, it's going to be uncomfortable at first, but this is the only way to address the problem. And my third one, and I think it's also perhaps something that we need to accept about everyone, that not everyone is as aware, not everyone is as preoccupied with the matter, and that's normal. Some people are going to have different interests, but we want to be the kind of people that give second chances, that others learn from their mistakes. So we don't want to be the kind of people that punish, that we are jury, judge, and executioner at the same time, on the spot. Of course, repeated toxic behavior is a completely different matter, but we need to make sure that we can recognize when an honest mistake is an honest mistake, and make sure that we do help the other person get better, not simply shoot them down.
Thank you so much. Giulia, your 3 tips. Also on the creative side, like
yeah. It's gonna be tough to follow up Christina's. No, so my first one is that you never have to settle for the stereotypes that communication imposes to you. You can be part of the change, so be. You don't feel represented in one ad, say it. Change the main protagonist, change the director that you work with. So be part of the change of that communication. The second one is that actually you should never be ashamed to ask questions and to acknowledge that you ignore some topics. Only in that sense you're gonna get better. You're gonna learn more things. You're gonna make from that lack of knowledge a strength. So decided to ignoring things is a choice. It's actually a choice. And then the last one, I think always I try to be respectful and mindful of the people around me until a point I realize that something is wrong. Something or some situation is not respectful with myself. So call it out. I know it's tough, but call it out, because in the moment when you lose respect of yourself, the people around you will never respect you again.
That it's so true and really resonate with me. Sometimes I cannot shut up, but it can be good and bad. But yeah, in this situation is always good. Ilaria, what's your 3 tips? What are your 3 tips?
in a way, I'm building on what's been just said, you know, all beautiful things and really right things. One, building on what Christina said, if it feels uncomfortable, it's probably the right thing to do. And don't underestimate the importance of, and the relief that people around you will have when you say that thing that's really uncomfortable. People would go, oh, finally someone has brought this up and we can talk about it. You know, it's like, don't sort of assume that you have to know it all. You know, like Julia was saying, you know, if you just acknowledge at the beginning, listen, I don't know everything about this, but I know it's not right, or it makes me uncomfortable. Can we talk about it? People around you will open up as a result of that. Sometimes you just have to sort of be the first one. The second one is around leadership. Like Christina said, it's not linked to a job role. Of course, you know, if leadership is of a certain type that impacts culture and everything, that's important. But remember that you can always, you are a leader because you have a voice. And the third one, which is, you know, if you cannot bring change and you've tried, just quit. You know, it's like, it doesn't mean you know, remember what your values are, and you cannot go against your values. You know, it's toxic. And so if you end up thinking, you know what, maybe it's not my place, you know, don't undervalue the importance of quitting, which is sometimes actually a good thing. And sometimes in our society, we demonize, do you say that? We sort of, you know, look at quitting as a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely agree with this one. Quit is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's also a way to find what you really love and a place that actually resonate with your value. So we didn't have any questions. It's weird because we usually have a lot of questions. Oh wait, just no, we didn't have any questions. So, well, thank you everyone then to be here tonight. It was a really interesting and insightful conversation. Thank you for each one of you in the panel, for everyone that attend the webinar tonight. And I hope to see you next time as well. So keep following us on social. Thank you for your amazing work and keep doing the good job. And I hope to see you around at some point. I hope we're gonna go back soon to the meetup face to face. Thank you, Christina, Julia, Tony, Ilaria, everyone, and have a lovely evening and a lovely weekend.
Nice to see you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.